Chad, welcome. So glad you're here today. Talk about your first deal. How are you?
I'm doing good, Michael. Thanks for having me on board. I appreciate it.
These calls always make my day because you just did your first deal. So we want to not get into the total weeds, but I do want to kind of get into a little bit how about how you found it, and then also kind of what difference it's made and what you're working on these days. So let's start first by just introduce yourself a little bit, provide a little background leading up to this first deal. Kind of what have you done or maybe not done? What do you do professional wise or anything? Give you a little background on everything leading up to you getting started with multifamily.
Okay, sure. So I'm Chad Zdenek, and I'm actually an engineer as well. I know yours as well in that field, or were. I have a business now called CSQ Properties, and we're basically following the Michael Blanc process, if you will. And I just closed on my first deal. I sold my business last year. I owned a lighting business. And I kind of did things, I burned the bridge before I had a property. We always talk about when you're going to leave your job, how many properties do you need to have before you leave. And I jumped in with both feet. I drank the Michael Blanc Kool-Aid, and I was off to the races. I sold my business last year, and then I haven't looked back. I just closed on my first apartment building here in Long Beach, California.
That's fantastic. Now, why did you get started with multifamily investing? In other words, was there a particular strategy or a particular problem you were trying to solve? What were you trying to do when you got started?
So that's a good question because I'm actually a licensed general contractor, and I was in construction management. I had done a lot of residential construction. And when I sold my business last year, it was a lighting business. And I had full intention of getting into flipping houses because I knew residential construction. It felt safe. And I know you've heard this story before, but it's true. That's how I felt comfortable. And I had a plan. I was going to buy one property and then try to buy another property and use my own capital. And that was the plan. Even like after I had sold the business, that I was off to the races, and that's what I was doing. I was working with brokers and looking at properties and putting together construction schedules, and I was really in the weeds on that a lot. And then mentor friend of mine said, "Hey, why don't you listen to Michael Blanc and check out some apartment buildings?" He was actually in the property management space, and at the time I hadn't heard of you. And so I did, and I was just like totally engulfed, like signed on board, like it totally made sense. And that's what I mean when I say I drank the Michael Blanc Kool-Aid, because it was really, really helpful. And I was so entrenched on going down this single path of single family homes, and I had my eyes set on it. So it took a lot to get me away from that. But you did it, and I'm very grateful for that. I bought the syndicated deal analyzer. I started looking at deals, and it was tough at first, but I'm really, really glad I made that shift. It's made a huge difference for me.
That is fantastic. So you got started. You heard me on a podcast, and you bought the SDA. Is there anything else that you did to get started with your education or anything like that you did in the beginning?
Yeah, I did. So like I mentioned, I'm an engineer, so I tend to do a lot of learning, continual learning. I read a lot of books, watched a lot of videos. Actually, I took a class. I got my MBA at UCLA, but I went back and took a class at UCLA Extension on multifamily investment analysis. And it was actually taught by now a friend of mine who's also a broker, John Swire. And so he was the teacher of the course. It was a 12-week class, and I learned a lot. And at the same time, I was, watching your podcasts, and I think I've probably seen all of them by now. So like it was like just like drinking through a fire hose. I was, watching your show in the car or listening to it in the car on the way to class, go to class, listen to your show afterwards, and really just taking it all in. And also like Jake and Gino and some of those other guys. Listening to what they had to say, and then really for me getting comfortable with it, because originally I was going to do it with my own money, and this I think was also really important pivot for me. Is I decided to take on investors, which was a really, really big deal for me. I didn't want to deal with other people's money just because of the stress and the responsibility of it. Like we talk about, it's always a little easier to lose your own money than someone else's money. But I decided to, after I got educated and learned a lot more, I decided to take on other investor money. And at first I was gonna, go in at the $25,000 minimum, and then, like again, you talked about, hey, you should go higher than you think, and deal with less investors. And then also working with my broker, had a lot of the same advice. And so I actually went in at $100,000 minimum, and that was probably the easiest part of the process. I had no idea that I would be able to raise that money. And I was in escrow on the deal. I needed to raise like 1.2 million for a $2 million property. And I raised the money probably in about like maybe 4 or 5 weeks.
Wow.
I had to release contingencies before I had the money, which was really nerve wracking. And I know a bit risky, but it's a really tight market right now. It really is a seller's market. So I didn't really have a choice. If I wanted my offer to kind of rise at the top, I had to be willing to release contingencies before I had the money. And that's what I did. I think that's what us as entrepreneurs, we take these calculated risks. And I hustled every single day. I hustled and wound up raising 1.2 million for that.
That's amazing. So, tell us a little about this deal. We're gonna take the money. I want to ask some more questions about the money raising stuff. But how did you find the deal? What's the deal size? Tell us a little bit about the deal.
Okay. So yeah, I've been looking strictly in Long Beach right now. It's traditionally non-rent control. There's California statewide rent control, which kind of throws a wrench in things a little bit, but it doesn't have LA City rent control. And me as a construction guy, I wanted to have a value add project where I could get into some construction and add value in that regard. So it's a 10-unit building in Long Beach, built in 1959. I think it's eight two-unit places and eight two-unit apartments and two one-unit apartments. And they all needed work. The outside needed work. It was a perfect project for me. It's only like 2 miles from the beach, great location, up and coming, and a lot of other development work going on around that area. And my broker actually helped me find it. The guy John Swire had mentioned, he helped me find it, and it was on market. Nothing fancy on some off market deals, an all market deal, and yeah, we just closed in September.
That's awesome. So this is actually very interesting. You initially going to use your own money for this, and you said, "Oh my gosh, I think I'm going to raise it." What gave you the confidence to raise $1 million? I mean, yeah, I know you mentioned that you're entrepreneurial and we take calculated risks all the time, but why did you feel some degree of confidence that you were able to raise that amount of money?
I that was really like just the blind step. I've hearing from other people that have done it and other experts that have gone down this path. And I'd like to talk about the law of the first deal later on, but
Yep.
that first step was just critical. It helped that I had some money of my own. I didn't have enough to do that deal, but I had enough, and I would have to have leveraged a lot to make it happen. And I also had some harder money type solutions. So technically I wouldn't have lost my deposit, but I wouldn't have got my returns at all if I had to go down the plan B route.
Right.
But I knew that I had the plan B route if I had to. It just would have wiped out all my profits on the deal.
Yeah, it was definitely would not have been ideal. So that's pretty cool. And I think you see that a lot. You can't figure everything out up front, and it sounds like kind of that's what happened to you. You figured out a lot, but not all of it. And at some point, you just have to take a calculated risk, and you
Yeah.
realize that there was a plan B, so you wouldn't lose the money. It definitely was not ideal, but it certainly motivated you a lot to hustle for sure.
Yeah.
Now, you did mention the law of the first deal. How did that factor into your experience?
Yeah. So I think, initially I knew about it just from reading your material. I didn't believe it necessarily just because I hadn't gone through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
been trusted in the process, but I hadn't experienced it myself. But man, let me tell you, after I closed that deal, my phone won't stop ringing. I got so many brokers calling me, and like you said, they would never return my phone call before. It did help actually that the you have one podcast where you talk about what you need to say in order to get calls returned. That actually did help, but they weren't calling me. I was still having to chase them down and then hope they call me back and blah blah blah. But man, after I closed that first deal, like within probably 2 weeks, I must have had like 6 brokers call me and say, "Hey, I've got pocket listings or I got off market deals, and what about this? What are you looking for?" And it was really, really, really amazing at how much of a 180-degree turnaround that was with the brokers. And then also with the bank, I'm actually in escrow on a second unit right now, or second building rather. Um, so like 2 weeks after, I found another property with my same broker, and I went into escrow on that, which I'm in escrow in now. And I had a 850K raise for that, which I had fully raised in 1 week. So it was amazing that how much faster the money came, how much more eager the brokers were to talk to me, and then the bank side, like they already have all my information, and they already, I mean, it was pretty brutal, like the stuff that they put you through as the first buyer, and I'm kind of in that spot where my loan's not big enough to where they ignore me, and it's small, it's not so small that it's still pretty serious. So I'm in that kind of weird space where there's a lot of paperwork that you need to go through. But now I've already done that, and it's just like click a button, here I am, and the funding for the second deal has been much easier.
That is amazing. That's so cool. And now it's like, you'd have to try harder not to do that second deal, right? You'd have to like, oh no, thank you, I'm good. Like, no, don't stop calling me.
Yeah, I literally just had that phone call with a broker today. He
Yeah,
called me up. He's talking to me about this deal he's got, and I'm like, I got these 2 deals like too close together. I said I need some time, and but they keep bringing them to you. It's amazing because they know you're a serious buyer at that point. You know what I
that's right.
mean? They
Yeah,
know you got a track record. You've talked about that, and it really really does play into that law of the first deal.
yeah, that's awesome. What parting advice do you have for someone who's looking to do their first deal? What would you leave them with?
Well, I think like for me, coming from a technical engineering background, like for me, it worked to really get educated. I had to get educated to feel comfortable asking for other people's money, um, and and I think it's really important that you work your network before you need your network.
Hmm.
And I know you've talked about this at times too, and it really is true. Like it doesn't matter what you're doing right now, what W-2 job or self-employed, whatever you're doing, you just got to do it at 100% because people are always watching. And
Yeah.
once you've kind of done that, and you've networked with vendors or suppliers or managers or coworkers, all these people, they know how you are as a person. And then once they learn that you're doing something else, if you've been successful in the first thing, they're more likely to trust you and ultimately invest with you. And that's what I experienced.
This is fabulous, Chad. How can people connect with you?
So the best way is csqproperties.com, or email address is info@csqproperties.com. And we're also on Instagram and Facebook under a CSQ Development, which is the construction arm of the company.
Chad, thank you so much for coming on here, and I'm sure your story will inspire thousands of people to try to walk in your footsteps. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you again at the next Dealmaker Live. It's been very helpful.